Isolate for just a week. Major changes to the rules in England if you have COVID. It only applies if you are fully vaccinated and have 2 negative lateral flow tests. Christmas for many is not cancelled then, but what about New Year?
As the Prime Minister has said, whilst there's no need for any further restrictions before Christmas, we will certainly keep the situation under review.
All change on Boxing Day in Wales. The rule of 6 returns as the First Minister says an announcement could be imminent about vaccinating some younger children. Also ahead, accused of another count of rape, the Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy. And...
well, just look at my car and just look what a mess I'm in too. Oh no!
One of the stars of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Sally Ann Howes, has died.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. It's all change in England if you test positive for COVID. From today, you can come out of isolation after a week if you are fully vaccinated and you have 2 negative lateral flow tests on days 6 and 7. The new rules also apply to those in isolation right now. But while Christmas is not cancelled for some, it's still unclear what will happen straight after. Here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina.
It's already been cancelled in Scotland and now new restrictions are coming in for Wales. But what's happening in England at New Year? Nobody yet knows. One thing, though, is changing the rules on self-isolation, meaning that those with COVID now, such as John Purvis, may get home for Christmas.
It's the best Christmas present I could get this year, I think, just to be able to go home and be with my family at Christmas and not be on my own. You know, for me, that's the best Christmas present I could ask for.
People with COVID can end their isolation on day 7 now instead of day 10 if they have tested negative on a lateral flow test on day 6 and day 7 and they no longer have symptoms. But you'll be encouraged to limit contact with the vulnerable, avoid crowded and poorly ventilated places and to work from home if possible. Unvaccinated people who have COVID or are a contact case will still have to isolate for the full 10 days. But what about New Year in England? The Health Secretary visiting a hospital in South London wouldn't be drawn, saying only that the data on Omicron is still under review.
We keep an eye on all that data and discuss it with our expert advisors. And as the Prime Minister has said, whilst there's no need for any further restrictions before Christmas, we will certainly keep the situation under review.
Where is the Prime Minister? Is he hiding?
The Prime Minister, he couldn't be working harder than he is. I mean, I'm having meetings with him probably 2 or 3 times a day, and I know he's taking many other meetings and focusing on so many other challenges that the country faces.
At the moment, everyone is in complete limbo. And it actually suggests that Boris Johnson hasn't got a grip of what's going on, that it's absolute chaos in Downing Street, and he doesn't know what he's doing from one moment to the next.
Could all those allegations of parties in Number 10, now being investigated by a senior civil servant, explain the lack of information about what we're allowed to do at New Year in England? It's a ridiculous situation, isn't it, where a Prime Minister himself is being investigated for breaking the rules. He really doesn't have the authority to tell us how to behave, does he?
That's absolutely not the case, and we all have to behave responsibly. We all have to take a balanced approach to this, and we have said, you know, there will be a review and she'll come forward with the information. No, that's it.
But with just over a week to go until New Year's Eve, many urgently want more clarity. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
It is all change in Wales too. From 6 a.m. on Boxing Day, the First Minister Mark Drakeford has just announced a raft of new measures. The rule of 6 is back. It means a maximum of 6 people can meet up in regulated premises such as restaurants, pubs, cinemas and theatres. 2-metre social distancing will return too, as will table service. The maximum number of people who can gather at an indoor event will be 30 and 50 people outdoors. Mr Drakeford also said they would reinstate a specific offence for large gatherings in private homes, as he urged people to limit the number of people visitors they have. Ellie Pitt is in Cardiff. The return of some very strict restrictions then for Wales, and also some potential news about jabs for younger children.
Yes, Nina, these are the biggest changes that we've seen to the rules here in Wales since we were coming out of restrictions just 6 months ago in the summer. The biggest changes are to the hospitality industry. Mark Drakeford has announced in particular measures there, as you say, rule of 6 returns, track and trace is back, mask wearing and other limits on the number of people who can get together. Although there are exceptions for milestone events, this does have implications for things like weddings, civil partnerships, wakes and christenings. In those circumstances, it depends on the size of the venue that you're going to and whether they can adhere to social distancing there. Also, everyone's got to take a lateral flow test. There's a specific offence for large gatherings in homes, but Mark Drakeford did stop short of making it illegal for people to gather on a normal basis in people's homes. He just issued strong guidance and advice on that around limiting numbers and the frequency of those get-togethers. Here's why he explained he's introducing these measures.
Even since I spoke to you on Friday, the number of confirmed Omicron cases has risen sharply, and at the same time, we are also seeing a rapid rise in the overall rates of the virus across Wales. We expect this trend to continue and to accelerate.
The other announcement he mentioned was that we're waiting on the JCVI's advice about whether primary school aged children should be vaccinated. On that, ITV News understands we expect that the JCVI's advice is that they shouldn't all be vaccinated. Only under 11s who are clinically vulnerable should be eligible for the jab. Here in Wales, as we turn into the new year, it feels like the familiar return of restrictions.
Ellie Pitt, thank you very much for all that. Thank you. So big divisions emerging now between the UK nations and the plans of millions up in the air or over altogether. I'm joined now for reaction by Emma McClarkin from the British Beer and Pub Association. Welcome. These divisions across the UK must be a real headache for pubs up and down the country right now.
We are seeing variances now emerging across the country, with Scotland announcing yesterday 1 metre, Wales 2 metres today, and a return to table service with varying distances and groups of peoples. So it gets very complicated to run businesses in that respect, and for our customers to understand exactly what the rules are in the different parts of the United Kingdom. But of course, there is still great uncertainty over what's going to happen in England, and we need to get clarity and certainty from the government about what's going to happen, particularly over the New Year period here in England.
OK, so while you wait for that clarity from the government, are you advising pubs to plan that England could follow Wales and Scotland and return to, strict social distancing rules for hospitality, table service, all that we thought we left behind?
Well, of course, we will be monitoring the situation, advising of the changes in Scotland and in Wales, but it does make it enormously difficult to plan for your businesses when you don't know what's going to happen. We unfortunately have been in these situations before during the pandemic, with different scenarios playing out, different restrictions. All we do know is that when we enter into these, they have significant impact on our trading ability, and that is coming at a crucial period of time over the New Year period. And this is something that we are deeply concerned about, affecting not only the survivability of our businesses, but of course their recovery in the future.
Yeah, what about the rules changing in England on isolation and being able to get out early if you test negative? Will that help pubs in terms of staffing at the very least?
Well, the reduction in self-isolation time for those that have had COVID-19 is seen as enormously helpful to the pub and the brewing sector. It will help alleviate some of the pressures that we've seen around staffing, and particularly at this festive period where we need to know that we can have staff on hand to maximise what was left of our Christmas trade this year. So we're really hopeful that will help us move forward and help us be able to get people back to work, but also bringing our customers back in and reducing the amount of time that life has to be put on
absolutely. And that change, as we said earlier, does start from today. Emma McClarkin, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. In Northern Ireland, ministers are meeting to discuss introducing more restrictions there. Let's go straight to Stormont's UTV's political editor Tracy McGee, who's been following this. What can we expect from Northern Ireland then?
Well, the short answer, Nina, is not very much. On the table for discussion is limiting the number of people allowed to meet up indoors. That expected to take place from midnight on Boxing Day. But hospitality and retail are expected to stay open, perhaps with extra social distancing measures. Nightclubs, though, may very likely close. They're also discussing whether or not to make the current work-from-home guidance a legal requirement. Now, the peak of Omicron is not expected here until mid-January, but one of the main things on the minds of our politicians is a lack of money. Politicians here don't tend to agree on much, but they all say unless more money is made available by Westminster, their options will be severely contained.
Tracy McGee, thank you very much. Let's return to our political correspondent Libby Vina at Westminster. When do you think we'll get this clarity then on what could happen next in England?
Well, that is the big question. The Prime Minister does seem to have avoided those potentially very embarrassing headlines of Christmas being cancelled for a second year running. But we really don't know what we will be allowed to do and what we won't be allowed to do at New Year. New Year's Eve is only next Friday. So I think it's understandable that businesses who are hoping to host big events are very concerned about this. The problem for the Prime Minister is that he can issue guidance to people, but if he wants to introduce actual restrictions, which requires a vote in Parliament, he's promised to come back to Parliament. And remember, the current Plan B, he only got through with Labour support. I think if he did come back to Parliament between Christmas and New Year, he would have to rely on Labour again to get the legislation through, and that would be a very uncomfortable position indeed for the Prime Minister to find himself in.
Libby Vina, many thanks. Thank you. Let's round up all that then with Dr. Margaret Harris from the World Health Organization. Thank you for joining me once again. An ever-changing situation. It feels like we're going backwards, not forwards. Should countries right now be doing different restrictions for those who are not getting vaccinated?
It's not a good idea to be specifically stigmatizing people who are not getting vaccinated. What every country, every one of us needs to do is to try to understand why those who are not yet vaccinated are not vaccinated. It's not simply always because they believe in misinformation or they're strongly anti-vax. Very often it's simply they didn't feel the need for it at the time. It wasn't available. There is so much more we can do to get people vaccinated, but the message really needs to be, this is what will protect you from severe disease and death. And we really need to work very hard to stop the deaths and severe disease.
When, Margaret, will we know if Omicron leads to a milder disease than Delta? And crucially, if it does, whether that's because of COVID antibodies from previous infection or vaccination, or because the virus itself is getting weaker? When will we know that?
That's an excellent question, Nina, and you've actually answered it. I've given half my answer already. You've explained it very well. It is not clear yet whether the milder, the fewer numbers of people with severe disease that we've been seeing in South Africa is a result of that population already having 80% of people having had a previous infection with the previous version of SARS-CoV-2. And we again hope and think that good vaccination coverages should hold it off. But the problem is, it is a massively effective virus. It spreads through the population so rapidly that even if you've got most people vaccinated, you will still have that small percentage not vaccinated, and they're the ones that will end up in hospital. And small percentage in a country of 60 million people turns into a very large number of people.
You have said, though, given that circumstance that we're facing the world over at the moment, that even the small percentages is a lot of people and it could overwhelm health systems like the NHS. You have said countries shouldn't be looking to do lockdowns anymore. Can you just take us through why you said that?
So why I said that was not that you shouldn't, but that should be your last resort, because lockdowns do work. But the price you pay is very high. The price you pay economically, the price you pay socially, and the price individuals pay in mental health. You know, it causes a lot of other consequences that are very difficult to deal with. So yes, it works, but we also know the public health social measures, the masking, the reducing the number of opportunities for the virus to jump from person to person. So that's like reducing the number of times we meet or how we meet, increasing the ventilation in your homes and your spaces, wearing that mask when you're indoors with other people.
And very briefly, Margaret Harris, can I just, sorry, we've got about 20 seconds left. What should the World Health Organization be doing more to ensure the world finally gets fully vaccinated next year? The only way of trying to stop new variants. We've got about 20 seconds.
So we should be doing a lot more of what we have been doing, which is working hard with the manufacturers to really get them to up the supply and up a reliable supply. So every country that hasn't yet received enough vaccines knows when it's coming, plans it properly, gets those vaccines to every person that needs to happen, and also really work to get the vaccines made in the countries that are currently at the end of the queue so that ultimately they don't have to queue up. They can make the vaccine.
Yeah. OK. Dr. Margaret Harris, thank you very much for joining us, and a very Merry Christmas to you. Thank you.
And
the Manchester City footballer Benjamin Mendy has been charged with another count of rape. The 27-year-old is now accused of 8 sexual offences against 5 different women. Our North of England reporter Hannah Miller is at Chester Crown Court. Hannah, take us through what happened there today.
Well, Benjamin Mendy appeared in court here this morning as the judge allowed further details of the case against him to be reported. We can now reveal he faces an additional charge of rape after a new victim came forward to talk about an incident which is said to have happened in July. That brings the total number of charges against him to 7 counts of rape and 1 of sexual assault against 5 different women on 4 different dates since October last year. Benjamin Mendy denies the charges. He's now been in custody for almost 4 months since the end of August, and the former Premier League star will remain there over Christmas. His trial had been set to get started early next year in January. That date has now been pushed back until at least June as the number of accusations against him grows.
Hannah Miller, thank you. A man who admitted stalking the presenter and I'm a Celebrity contestant Louise Minchin and her daughter has been jailed. Carl Davis, who's 44, was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months. The court heard how he posted multiple intimidating messages to Miss Minchin and her daughter's social media accounts intended to maximise fear and distress. Finally, this lunchtime, one of the stars of the classic film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang has died. Sally Ann Howes played Truly Scrumptious in the children's favourite. Her son announced her death, aged 91. She enjoyed a career spanning decades on both stage and screen and lately managed to inspire a whole new generation on TikTok. Rebecca Barry reports.
Truly scrumptious, you too are truly scrumptious, scrumptious as the breeze across the bay.
She brought magic to childhoods across generations. Sally Ann Howes, best known for playing Truly Scrumptious in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang, chitty bang bang, chitty chitty bang bang.
The actress, whose career spanned 6 decades, has died, aged 91.
And I like your car.
Adrian Hall, who played Jeremy Potts in the film, among those now paying tribute.
Huge part of my life. I've known her since I was 8. Such a kind, lovely, beautiful person who always had time for everybody and who always made everybody feel comfortable. It's going to be the world is a slightly emptier place without knowing that she's there.
Kenneth?
Born in 1930 in northwest London, Sally Ann's career began as a teenager when she appeared in the film Thursday's Child.
Well, if I could really do the part, because if it wasn't a bit like me, I shouldn't know what to do. I'd make a fool of myself. Aren't we two go?
She was nominated for a Tony Award for her performance in the 1963 musical Brigadoon.
What do you see?
But it will always be Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for which she's best remembered. She apparently did this famous scene in a single take. Now appealing to a whole new audience on social media, with TikTokers recreating the dance. As usual, the film will be shown on Christmas Day, her family saying they thought she might see it one last time, but she passed away on Sunday. Her son saying she's now reunited with her husband of 48 years, who died earlier this year.
That's it this lunchtime. Lucrezia is here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. From me and everyone here for now, bye-bye.